Hotep, I am that I am. So call me Heru, your modern monk, your cannabis fitness strategist, back at it again. Here with you, here to tune you in, to tune you up. Here with a special guest, Lisa Wimberg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm awesome. And especially being able to get a chance to chit chat a little bit with you. So tell me a little bit about yourself as well as this neuro sculpting.
Yeah. So neurosculpting is a process I had to create in order to heal my mind and body. Um, it's similar to meditation, but it's very different. Most people think meditation, they think, oh, I can't clear my mind. And meditation does lots of things. But one thing it did not do for me ever, and I've been meditating my whole life, it never really enabled me to change my patterns. It enabled me to calm down, but not really to optimize or change the patterns. And so, to make a very long story short, I started meditating when I was 12 for some strange reason. It's not like it was part of my culture to do so. It was
Right.
just something that I gravitated to and it made sense to me. And I was fanatical. And then when I turned 15, I suffered a traumatic incident where I was hit by lightning and I developed seizures.
Wow.
And these seizures got worse and worse over the years, um, to a life-threatening status where my heart would stop, my brain would turn off, and I would be not breathing for longer and longer periods of time. Sometimes there was resuscitation interventions. One time I woke up to a needle of atropine right at my heart, which is the
Ooh,
Pulp Fiction scene.
yes.
Um, and I was told that I had a stress disorder, brainstem vasovagal seizure disorder. I didn't know what any of that meant.
Ooh.
Um, I only knew that none of that made sense because I was a meditator and meditators aren't supposed to feel stress, right? So
Right, right,
I
right.
was I was totally confused. So I thought, yes, I love my meditation practice and my metaphysical practices, but clearly I don't understand my body. And clearly my body is asking for me to understand it. So I started studying neuroscience because I knew the seizures were getting worse. There was no medicine, there was no treatment protocol. And they said, you'll just have to deal with this. Well, it's
Wow.
not something you want to deal with. I mean, really what lit the fire under me to find a solution was I was in Whole Foods with my daughter when she was 3, and I had a seizure in the food court. And my kid watched me flatline.
Ooh,
Like, that is nothing you ever are prepared for. She watched paramedics resuscitate me. She had no idea what was going on. She asked me if I died. I had to teach her how to dial 911 at 3 years old because this is happening more and more. And I had to teach her what to do.
wow.
I was a single mom at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, this could have happened in my home. And my
Right.
kid would have been completely by herself. So I had a lot of motivation and I had a lot of desperation, which is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
It's a great combo. Uh, and so I learned about neuroplasticity. I learned about what my body and nervous system needed. And I realized, oh my God, my meditation practice was missing strategy and neuroplasticity practices.
Interesting.
And if
Interesting.
and if I could backwards engineer this idea of meditation and put it in a framework of brain entrainment, what does my brain need that meditation is not giving me that could allow me not just to relax? I was great at
Right.
relaxing. I was so dissociated and numb. I was relaxed all the time. But what did my brain need to safely embody and process stress? That was not taught to me through meditation. So through neuroplasticity, I learned how to speak to my nervous system. I learned how to get it to listen to me. I learned how to safely change my patterns, right? So if you think about seizures, sorry, there's an ambulance going by. If you think about seizures and a stress response seizure disorder, then that's just a pattern. It's a
Right.
response pattern to stress. So neuroscience taught me that I could overwrite that with neuroplasticity practices. And I thought I have everything to lose if I don't do this. I
Right.
have my entire life to gain if this works, because I have no other solutions. And so I practiced this. I made up this protocol, this 5-step protocol, and I practiced it over and over and over again. And inside of the, meditation 5-step protocol, I was rehearsing a new response pattern. And that new response pattern was, anything I could think of that was the opposite of seize. So I was
Right.
actually doing, like, if you imagine a sports athlete running the play over and over again in their head, that's neuroplasticity practice, right? Envisioning and repetition. I was doing that inside of a meditation container, and I was practicing a new response pattern to a seizure onset. And I didn't know if it was going to work, but I practiced for probably 7 months. And then another seizure came, because I never knew when they would come.
Okay. Okay.
And another seizure wave came, and there's usually like 1 or 2 seconds of seizure onset before you're out. And I could feel the seizure onset, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to die. This is it. But the pattern I had been rehearsing inside of this meditation container kicked in on autopilot. I had rehearsed it so much, so well, that it became an automated default response pattern. Even though I had only ever imagined it, I imagined it with such efficiency and strategy and quality repetition that my nervous system believed it was an available response pattern. And so when that seizure hit, it never fully hit. My response pattern kicked in, the one I had been rehearsing, which was, I'm not going to seize. I'm going to fight through this. And I broke through my first seizure in my whole life. I broke through it, did not lose consciousness. My heart didn't stop. And then my whole body shook for hours and hours as my nervous system was resetting and recalibrating to an entirely new pattern. And when I was done, I knew they were gone forever. That was 17 years ago. And I was in the corporate world at the time. And I knew that because this process that I had created out of desperation gave my daughter the opportunity to grow up with a mother who was alive.
Right.
I committed to marrying this thing. I'm like, this is it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do business-wise or strategy-wise. I had no business plans whatsoever. All I knew was that I was alive and I was supposed to marry this thing and share it however that looked. And I had no idea how to do it. I was a single mom on welfare, having no clue how to start doing this, but I did it. And here I am.
Powerful story. Yes. Yeah. And that brings me, even with that being said, like what has been, I mean, I hear the drive, I hear the passion, I hear, the commitment. And with that being said, this particular technique you've been using, this 5-step protocol, how would you say, I know, and you mentioned too, you've been showing this protocol to what, first responders, certain people who actually are under a lot of stress. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
That this lifetime or during your period of time with this particular seizures, how was your stress levels? How was this anxiety? How was this, your lifestyle? Because I know we tend to, it seemed like, and this is something I've been very passionate about, we never really talk about our environment. You know what I'm saying? How powerful our environment is, that it stimulates these neural linguistics and different patterns that we don't really even give it an opportunity. These anomalies that goes on around us, and we don't even give it no power until really start tuning into it. Tell me a little bit about that level of.
It was interesting because I didn't perceive that I grew up with a lot of stress, but there's a bunch of different stress responses, and most of us assume will recognize stress because we assume it feels like anxiety or panic or agitation or I can't breathe, right? And that's one form of how stress presents itself, right? That's the arousal spectrum of stress. But then there's an entirely different way stress expresses itself in the body, and that's the opposite of that. And that's called freeze. And most of us don't know how to recognize the freeze stress response, because here's what it looks like. It looks like I'm totally calm. It looks like I have no response to the situation. And what I, as a person who freezes, is feeling inside is I'm dissociating. I'm not hearing you. I'm flat affect. I'm not responding. I'm frozen like a deer in the headlights. And outwardly, it looks very calm. Outwardly, freeze looks very grounded. So when you're in that stress expression, it's difficult to recognize you're in stress. And so in my particular situation, that was my default response, was freeze. So I didn't know I had compound stress. I didn't know I was having stress responses. And if you don't intervene to regulate from a stress response, it perpetuates itself.
Builds up, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So because I was never recognizing it and because I was never doing anything about it, it became my baseline. And anytime my body needed to tell me it was stressed, it had to go past that baseline.
Wow.
And in my case, going past that frozen baseline was more frozen. I was unable to recognize stress. So, but to your question around the environment, the nervous system's job, which is what regulates our stress, it's what gives us our stress response. Its job is to be the interface between two things: the brain and all we're thinking and feeling. And it's supposed to be the interface that helps our body move and act in accordance to how our brain perceives. But the even bigger thing that the nervous system does is it's the interface between the environment and our body's response. And so in all moments, your environment is inputting to your nervous system information. And if we're not listening to that, right? And that's everything from, right? Do you have a bed to sleep in? Do you have shelter? Do you have quality relationships? Are you in toxic smoke? Are you in a house with lead paint? Are you eating garbage food? Are you watching too much negative social media? Like everything outside of our body is considered our environment, our external environment. And the nervous system is very busy trying to make meaning of all of that information. And it does so by telling our bodies how to respond to that at the micro level. So your environment is absolutely dialoguing with your nervous system right now. And if you don't know how to recognize when you are not in a grounded space with that, and if you're only looking for the agitation stress response as your indicator, you're missing half the story, and you're missing half your opportunities to regulate your body. And honestly, to a lot of us, I think, are here consciously to be our best selves. And you can't be your best self from a dysregulated, contracted space. You can try really hard to be your best self, but it's not going to land.
No. So that kind of brings me into that understanding of that role, what you were saying about what you started learning about neuroplasticity and how neuroplasticity built those particular nerves are built. Kind of, it reminds me of the process of stem cells, right? How actually accumulate or repair or develop more to wherever that needed area or injured area, it actually multiplies. Tell me a little bit about neuroplasticity, just a little.
And I'll use the language because I know you you are a fitness person, and it's no different. I mean, yes, it's different because it's brain cells, and I'm going to use a muscle reference, but the
Right.
concept is the same. You want to build not just the strength of a muscle, but the definition and specificity of that muscle. You have to exercise it with things that cause it to learn its resistance and its
Yes.
resilience and repetition. So your muscles actually are showing you the cleanest, clearest example of how neuroplasticity works. It
Nice.
only works through strategic, focused repetition, period. And those are the laws that govern neuroplasticity. So if you have 5 hours a month to go to the gym, there's not a person on the planet I could ask this question to who would say 5 hours once a month is the best option. Everybody knows that's just silly. You can't go to the gym once a month and I'm going to go to the gym 12 times this year and I'm going to get the body I want. You know that if you've got those 5 hours, it's better to go an hour and 20 minutes a week. But it's even better to go 45 minutes twice a week. But it's even better maybe to go 20 to 25 minutes 3 to 4 times a week, right? If we take our exercise, right, and we break it into manageable, repeatable, focused chunks, and we do that frequently, that's how the body shifts. The brain is the same. So if we want to change a thought pattern, a belief pattern, we first must be able to prime the body to hear what we're even trying to do, right?
Right.
Just like you don't go to the gym after you don't sleep for days and don't eat for days. You eat, you sleep, you take your pre-workout, your BCAAs, you do all the stuff, right? You prime your body. So first you prime the mind by just getting into the nervous system and dialing down resistance. And there's fun techniques that we teach here at the Institute for that. Then you have its attention. So then you do short dose practices, 15 minutes or so. And in this case, it would be 15 minutes of neurosculpting meditation, where you are thinking of a particular mental pattern or belief pattern. You alter it with some techniques that we show you in your creative mind. And then you repeat that multiple times a week,
Big
short
time.
dose repetitions. And over time, your brain starts to buy the story that you've been telling it. You have to tell it very strategically. And that's kind of what, in a much longer conversation, someday we can talk about how do
Right.
you do that strategically?
Right. Right.
Because there's a way to do it that makes that happen very quickly. But basically, it is just the application of the laws of neuroplasticity, which says if you do a practice with focused attention, manageable amount of time, meaning short dose duration, and you repeat it frequently, you'll get your goals met. It's the
Big
only way
time.
it's the only way to really do it.
Big time.
Yeah.
Repetition.
Yep.
Repetition, consistency. I'm with you. Now it kind of remind me of like systemizing your daily routines. You talked about in your book, you really talked about like stop making excuses,
Yeah.
even aspects of taking the time to do it. What is your thoughts on like shadow work? I noticed that's been a little, thrown out there a little bit here and there. I've been catching that on some of these podcast shows and what.
Yeah. Well, I feel like everything is a pattern. Our best self traits are patterns, and our worst self traits are patterns, and they don't exist without the other, because that would mean they neither can exist, right? Like light can't exist without dark, right? They're expressions of the same thing, a spectrum. So we have both. What we focus on becomes the default pattern. So neuroplasticity laws will say, if you never address your shadow behaviors and they express themselves without intervention, without you course correcting, then they will just get stronger. And so, yeah, you have to do the shadow work at some point if you want to be your best self, because
Right.
you have to unwind or uncouple your habituation from the shadow behaviors. Now, you don't have to call them shadow. You can call them anything you want.
Right,
Like
right.
in the neurosculpting language, we call them stress patterns,
Stress pad.
because stress patterns will bring out what the metaphysical world calls shadow. Same
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
So when, and all of your listeners will know this to be true, when you are tired and hungry, which your body perceives as a stress state, right? Tired and hungry to your
Yep.
body is considered a stress state. You know, you don't have patience, forgiveness, love, and compassion for anybody. So, you know, your shadows come out when your body is perceiving stress.
Nice.
Your
Nice.
impatience, your aggressive nature, your judgy self, your demanding self, all of that comes out when we're tired and hungry. And so, shadow work, AKA stress states of being, all are opportunities for us to change those patterns, to regulate. It's all about regulating around those patterns so we change our relationship to them. But that means you, at some point, you kind of got to look at them.
Right, right. Yeah, you got to address them. I agree with that, because that kind of brings me into the next question about how you talked about sequencing your words, or I would say spells, because words are spells, kind of like affirmation. We use these affirmations to kind of put things in order, right? Like you was kind of talking about earlier about the neuroplasticity. Um, Tell me a little bit about that, like how you I know this is part of your uh, yeah, your neurosculpting book on habits for new
Yeah.
habits. Talk about sequencing words. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about that
Well,
aspect.
you know, words have so much power for a bunch of reasons. Number one, they're generated, the literal meaning of a word is generated from the left brain language centers. The intended, implied, symbolic meaning of the word is created by the right brain language centers. So words kind of cross both sides of the brain. But the
Okay.
interesting thing is, when we speak, we're not just engaging with the built-in meaning of the word, but then it comes out of our mouths and then it goes back into us by way of us hearing ourselves say it.
Wow.
So
Yes.
that's like double whammy.
Yeah.
So what are you saying and what are you hearing back and reinforcing, right? So
Right.
when we look at the languaging of, oh, how do we talk about ourselves? How do we talk about the world around us? When we use statements like, you know, the world is terrible, when we're speaking negatively, we're not just speaking it, we're hearing it back. And when
Right.
we hear it back, it's impacting us a second time. Imagine every negative thought you have double impacting you every time you spoke it. So you're
Powerful.
looking at, the brain will grow what it hears and notices and interacts with most. So language is really important. But the other thing that the brain does is it calls BS on the fake positive language. So if you're like, yay, today's great, the brain's like, BS, it's great. So you have to be able to very strategically trick the brain. And when I say trick, I don't mean lie to it. I mean, find the plausible positivity, not the too big positivity, the realistic positivity. So,
Okay.
so what
Okay.
I like to start with, because you can't tell someone in trauma to just say, the world is safe and lovely. It just doesn't work. But
Right.
what you can tell somebody in a stress state is to find gratitude for the situational comfort available to them. So, for instance, life may still suck, but right now, I'm grateful I know where the bathroom is.
No doubt.
I'm grateful I have a roof over my head and climate control because it's really hot outside. I'm grateful I have two hands that work. Okay. I'm grateful I have temperature regulation. I'm grateful that I know where to get clean water and food. So when we speak of language, it has to be believable. or the brain's going to just disregard it. So for me, I like to hear myself voice the plausible positivity, which is not the same as toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is a denial.
Okay.
Plausible positivity is recognizing situational comfort and focusing on it so that your body can start to regulate and calm down. And then you can start looking at, like, what do I hear myself say? I almost think it'd be a really maybe horrific experiment to do, to record yourself talking all day long in general conversation and listen back and realize what's been coming out of your mouth all day. I mean, that would be a really interesting thing to see how
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
negative we are all the time. But in the neurosculpting process, we use language very specifically to engage a left and a right brain activation for extra neuroplasticity. And that's a whole other topic that we could go into at some
Big
point in the
time.
future.
I know, yeah, because a lot of, well, I know a lot of your process is based on a cognitive framework.
Yes.
Cognitive
Yes.
framework, yeah. So that's some of the things I've been kind of diving more into because I know one of the other things I would think neuroplasticity or neurosculpting would be a big benefit for this PTSD.
PTSD. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I have.
it's a lot of people who actually migrate or have this issue, and really don't even understand or know what's going on. I mean,
No.
even coming up as a youth, I mean, I was in the resource classes. I had those issues, but all I needed really was some time. Just give me some time, show me what was up, then I could actually understand what's going on. They claimed that I had ADD. This is back in the 80s, so you know how that worked.
Yeah.
Back then, they were still testing, they were still doing these particular situations. But at the same time, I think to be able to really go back into these, particular neurosciences and really look at some of these things and kind of get some clarity, it makes more sense. Even with, like I said, you're a trailblazer. You taking on a whole nother a whole nother area of what neuroscience actually offers, and I want to be a part of this, movement as well. I see what you're doing is definitely in impactful, influential, and it really brings me into an understanding where we definitely have to take the time to reboot. We definitely got to take the time to reprogram. We definitely got to take the time to kind of go back to our values and really see what we truly want to be about, if that makes sense, or what our future self truly is. Is there anything else you would like to share?
Yeah. Just to touch on the PTSD thing. I have so many clients and students who come with extreme stress and PTSD. And one of the things that they always tell me is that they haven't found a good intervention through meditation because they just can't shut off their brain.
Right.
And so
But
one of the really
yeah.
user-friendly things about neurosculpting is we don't ask you to clear your thoughts. We're actually going to use the thoughts and lots of talking and lots of fun imagery to help you direct your thoughts. And so it tends to be well received by those with PTSD. And we don't need you to talk about your story. And with
Right.
PTSD, the more you talk about it, sometimes the more you reinforce it. This goes back to that language thing. You're hearing
Yeah.
yourself say it.
Right.
It's impacting you twice. First, you craft it and speak it. Second, you hear it and it hits you again. We don't need to do that with neurosculpting. We don't even need to go into the details. We only need to invite the nervous system to reshape its relationship to the thing it's been holding on to. And if that thing is too scary to look at, we just call it the scary thing you don't want to look at.
Right.
Right?
Straight
Like
thing.
we just point to it. You don't have to dive into it and like taste it all again.
Right.
So
Relive it.
it tends to be really helpful for those with PTSD. But the last thing I want to say to, all your people listening is that, you know, one, there's one thing we all have in common, and it doesn't matter culture, geographics, ethnicity, history. There's one thing that is above and beyond all of that, and that's we're mammals, period. Yes. We're mammals as the least common denominator across the spectrum. And as mammals, our nervous systems are functioning off the same set of principles. Right. And we are not taught those in school. We're not taught those at all. But if we understood the operating system and how to program it efficiently and effectively, then all of the hopes, dreams, and wishes that we've been spending all of our time trying to manifest and they're not manifesting would actually come into being much faster, because they require an open and regulated state in order to embrace them. So we skip steps, right? We don't spend time learning how to regulate. Instead we spend time spending $10,000 on a motivational seminar that teaches us how to manifest.
Right.
That's step 10. Step 10 is, as a mammal, how do I get receptive to that? How do I get regulated enough to orient towards it? How do I get balanced enough to use my brain to actually cultivate that? So I think the self-help world is wonderful, and it tries to start people at a step they're not prepared for. The operating system and how you program it is the baseline. And if you don't know that language, you have zero control over your baseline. And then anything that happens to you is going to either be happenstance, chance, or luck.
Right. Awesome.
So yeah, you've got an operating system. Learn how to use it. I got the manual. Happy to share it with you.
For sure. And I appreciate your time you have given, and thankful and very grateful for you. Continue doing what you're doing, because it's definitely an impact on this universe. Until next time, I appreciate you. You have a great day.
Yes, you too.